Yay! Welcome back, Demian, for another episode of what has become the Creative Codes podcast. I love it. I just want to introduce you to those of you who have watched the podcast and were like, wow, who is this human? So allow me to introduce Demian. He is a main teacher of Magic Vibrations Healing School, and Demian offers a myriad of absolutely magical offerings indeed. He's traveled all around the world the last 25 years and has been based in Guatemala the past several years after living in India for a very long time. So much life experience, more than I will probably ever know. And so from this life journey, Demian offers magic water workshops, sacred journeys into the heart, cord cutting, soul retrieval, ancestral clearings, DNA activations, shamanic journeys, high initiations, raise initiations, quantum healing, magic templates, avataran, sacred teachings, freedom teachings like the Kathara templates, the Kathara grids, and so much more. He's also a certified teacher of light language coming from the School of Star Fuentes in Mexico since 2017. And now based in Guatemala, as I said, Demian is offering beautiful things such as the quantum group healings as well, which I've participated in several times now, so I highly recommend them. And constantly evolving, right, Demian? Constantly evolving.
Always,
Yeah.
Otherwise we get bored.
Sure, absolutely. So today we are going to talk about boundaries. There were a few ideas thrown around of boundaries, the egoic structures of defense, the ego backlash, all things that maybe you've had before, Demian, I know you have. And so we're going to focus on boundaries initially, and then we'll see how it unfolds. But I've got heaps of questions, so let's hop into it. All right. To start, the way I want to start is essentially, for me, the theme of relationship to father has come up a few times. And this has come up in the collective creative calibration group readings that I offer in my private Facebook group, which is weaving in what I've learned through psychic development and just sort of seeing and receiving what's arisen for the collective. And relationship to fathers popped up a few times. And for me, this feels quite linked to boundaries. Like the father as this, the support system, the father as directed action, the father as, in the very traditional nuclear family, working, very ordered, very disciplined. And so boundaries for me, I think of Saturn, I think of time, I think of course, physical boundaries, but they're metaphysical as well. Physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, energetic, relational. Are there such thing as quantum boundaries? I'm not sure. We can talk about that. That's a whole other thing, I'm sure. And so I guess to start, I'm interested to hear what is your own relationship to father as your own father as an energetic? What is your own relationship to father that has influenced your relationship to boundaries?
Okay, so that's a nice way to start. So first, if we speak about father, we also have to differentiate what it is from the mother. Let's say, the feminine. So from my point of perception, as a child grows with both parents in a, let's say, classic format family, and like a mother and a father, then what I see is that the mother teaches more about the boundaries with self, so like our inner boundaries, and which is somehow the family, but as well the boundaries between our different inner parts or inner personalities. And the father is more the embodiment of how do we behave with the society, with other humans? How do we behave with the clan? How do we behave, with the whatever the established, set of rules that we call, civilization, for example. So the father is, for me, always brings the codes of, how we relate to the external. So it's more like external boundaries.
Sure.
So it's boundaries between, let's say, me and, the rest of the world, other humans, structures, police, justice, governments, administrations, school, teachers, and so on.
Yeah.
So there's one aspect here that, the father is like the link somehow. So we look at the father to understand how should we behave
in society,
with the rest of the world.
Yeah.
And this is about morality, right?
Sure.
So morality, it's, what's good, what's bad. When the mother would be what is love and what is, unhealthy love, let's say. And so the father, it's more like, hey, this is, the code, the moral code, where you're born. And, I'm going to teach you so that you don't get, either humiliated or rejected, so that you can fit in. Now, there is another aspect of the father that is also our relationship to source,
God, the Father,
the divine, God,
Son, Father, Son as well.
Father, Son, exactly. So that will be as a connection to source, as like a vertical ascending connection, when the mother would be more our relationship to, like the planet Earth, nature, the subatomic level of identity, so our bodies, when the father would be more transcendental.
Yeah.
So like, like the guru, like the spiritual teacher as well. So this is where I see somehow that when we deal with our father, we also deal with authority.
Yes.
And authority has a lot to do with boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah, because authority, so the external authority is what defines what, let's say, healthy boundaries are, or acceptable, appropriate boundaries are. So this is the force that chooses for the clan, for the society, for all the group. And but then we also have our own set of inner boundaries, which is more related to our own inner authority.
Yes.
Yeah. So then eventually, as we grow up, we also become our own father, as much as we become our own mother. Yeah. So it means that eventually we become our own authority. Yes. Yeah. So if at the beginning a human usually goes for a rebel, a rebellious phase that can last for some of us like a really long time. It's because we question the external authority. We question, the code of morality, and just to make sure that it's actually fitting our own inner truth or our own, if it's resonating with us. So we test it, not to take it for granted, not to, just accept it without actually understanding, what are the virtues, the values, and why are they beneficial, let's say. Eventually, as one grows up, I would say that our rebel is supposed to become the leader, our own leader. So the leader is the inner authority that is defining what are appropriate boundaries.
Actually,
and what are inappropriate boundaries.
Yeah, something that just sort of came through is, would you say there's a sort of passage between from rebel to leader to father? Because last time we spoke very briefly of like the maiden mother crone. And so, I haven't necessarily heard, I've heard there's king, I'm not saying this in order, but king, prince, knight. But what I'm hearing here is there's even rebel, and the rebel, is discovering and breaking down the systems or questioning the code of ethics that the outside world has presented, what their own father figure has presented. And so the rebels sort of on the path of individuation, like, okay, but who am I? What do I believe? What's my code of ethics? What's true for me? And from that place, becoming a leader in their own right. And then from that place of leadership, perhaps becoming this sort of father figure and authority that can also be more supportive rather than just leading and nurturing as well. And also when you're speaking of father and what you said here of justice, authority, therefore boundaries as well, morality, this vertical channel, I instantly think of the Shiva Lingam, this sort of vertical, boundless, endless channel that gives. Would you say, actually, just speaking to that, I mean, because I feel like you know a lot more about that than I do, with the Shiva Lingam and the Shakti, this sort of polarity, how the words that come to me for this is force and form. So force being Shakti and the form being Shiva. Is that how you would describe this as well? Because I think of form as more boundaries.
Okay, so here you would have many different schools of thought.
Enlighten me,
so
Demian.
it's not mono-sided, right?
Sure.
I would say that usually Shiva would be related to consciousness.
Cool.
Not to form, but to consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
And Shakti would be, more like a manifestation, creation, so the form. So the form and the consciousness.
Yeah, okay.
And
so
as, for example, I mean, Shakti being feminine, dynamic, moving, forever changing, and Shiva being more the stillness point that allows, the contemplation, the observation, like to be localized in one point, like so. But Shiva has many different aspects, and he is as much feminine than he is masculine. Yeah, because there is a transcendental, aspect in Shiva, which it transcends the duality or the polarities. So in his form of Ardnarishwar, Ardnarishwar means is half and half, kind of. And so it's just so in this sense, you could say, that is more the father, and but he's a father and he's not really a father.
Okay.
Because the father, the father, there's still an identification with something where it's kind of transcending identification. Okay, but again, you have many different schools and many different levels, and even when in the people who study this for many years, you would have some different, this kind of dynamic. It's really rich, but we can say that it's the ability to transcend the form, and to remember what somehow where it comes from, that it's actually dreamt, so it's just this. So the lingam, this is what it represents as well. It represents the pillar
form, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
it's the pillar where everything comes back to, and where everything originated, let's say.
Oh, that's really interesting, actually. Then if this is if we're connecting this with boundaries, because then I've now introduced something which transcends form, somehow then transcends boundaries. So that's really interesting. So like, from that point of that 0 point, which is even something that came through last time, sounds like this sort of the central point from which things emanate somehow. And then, that's really interesting. Sort of like how do we connect this to boundaries? Does it even need to be connected? Maybe not. Maybe it's not. Maybe it's not so necessary to connect this, but it's more like the awareness of where all of this comes from. Like I see this as from that point, there's like the umbilical cord to the mother, like from child to mother as well. So, because like within boundaries, within father, I guess I've seen the umbilical cord to the mother as the sort of connection, the inner connection, and then the father seems somehow separate. But introducing this, it's now the father, beyond the father is this singular point, is the 0 point. So it's like, rebel, leader, father, all the way to singular point, all the way to this, linking this to father, to source, to God. That's sort of where it all can stream back to. I mean, ultimately everything does, right? So I like how that's sort of even transcending this conversation of boundaries, taking it back to source. I like that. Furthering on from that though, to weave it back into this theme more specifically, I'm curious, I guess, what your experience of being a father has been like within this sort of, I guess, narrative of authority and code of ethics and upholding that and sharing that and witnessing your own essence reflected in this little being, which is part of you. And then even the process of naming this child, like the boundary of self and other, which is super interesting. And so then names as part of boundaries, and then also your own name, like who named you? What does that name mean? What essence, what code is held within a name? Do you embody that name, or did you tell your parents that name before arriving into this body? It's so, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this is a big subject, the naming here. I would say that as a father, let's say of a biological father, with humans, I would say that, yeah, so there's this interesting thing where we have to help define boundaries. Yeah, so, but the boundaries are, as much for ourselves than for, let's say, the baby.
Yeah,
and
sure.
and there's this, like a baby at, let's say, after a few months, when it starts to crawl, the baby starts to put stuff in its mouth or her mouth. And this is the boundary thing. Yeah. So if I take something and I put it in my mouth, my nervous system reacts differently than if I bite myself.
Yes.
Yeah? If I bite myself, I say, hey, oh, okay, so that's me, right? Because I have a pain response. Like my nervous system, hey, that's it's you. When if you eat a stone, right, it's a different sensation. So the first things of boundary, is what is me, what is not me. Exactly. That's the definition of a boundary. Is what is this side of the line, what is the external side. And obviously at the beginning, it's all merged. Mostly the baby is completely merged with the auric field of the mother.
Yeah.
So, and then eventually, it takes many years to dissociate, let's say, and to kind of seal your own aura as a child, So in the tradition, we speak about 7 years. It's probably way faster now, mostly because, at 4 years old, or even sometimes before, parents would put their kids to the kindergarten. So it's probably happening before. But in the ancient, let's say, traditional societies, until 7, the child would stay exclusively with the mother and the woman, and then, would, or let's say if it's a boy, would move more with the man, or there would be like a rite of passage, And but today it's kind of all, a bit confused and messed up. So
well said.
But the boundaries, they come from there, the boundaries, yeah? They come from, as a child, doing something and having the authority. So the parents saying, hey, that's okay, that's not okay, that's dangerous, that's dirty, when you eat your own, I don't know, what your body produces, and you want to try it. Oh no, it's really dirty. Then,
Yes.
you kind of imprint, the taboo.
Yeah.
You imprint, oh, that's forbidden. And this is necessary, for survival. Yeah, because otherwise, there are more risks that we don't make it past, 1 year or even less.
Mhm.
So the boundaries are important, and like you say, the naming is something else.
Sure.
The naming, it's of course it's a boundary, because then you can say, hey, I am Demian, and there are, like, other people have other names, and we use the names to dissociate, differentiate, exactly. So, the name itself is, when my son was born, because he was born at home in the Himalayas, actually we were expecting a girl, because we never went to the hospital, we had no ultrasound, so we had no clue. And we actually felt it was a feminine energy. Well, when he was born and I welcomed him, then, I saw he had something that he was not a girl. So then we had no names, because we kind of thought about names for girls, but we didn't.
Oh, interesting.
So then after, once the whole thing, like putting mama and baby to sleep and cleaning, and then I went to sit and meditate, and then he kind of came and said, hey, this is my name, and this is what it means, and this is where I come from. So I would say in my case, it was kind of easy.
Beautiful.
But, I still don't know where this came from, right? I always claim it came from him, but actually, who knows, Nevertheless, this is a name that came with an entire grid, an entire resonance, a set of frequencies, like as well a numerology behind it. So, a set of qualities that is already writing a destiny, right? So it's imprinting, a direction. It's like a map.
Yeah.
It's a map. So, you have societies, traditional societies, where they don't name.
Like where?
Yeah, like in many native traditions, you don't name until you do something that really shows your unique codex.
Oh, interesting. Would that be within the first 7 years or so, or it's sort of
not
whenever?
necessarily. It can be way after.
Oh, wow, that's fascinating.
Like in some Native American cultures, there was no names, and then the name would be actually an initiation name. Yeah. So, like the one who ran with the wolves, or the one who saw like an eagle, or, just as actually a function, or like a why, and we spoke the last podcast about why we're here, the motivation. So sometimes the name carries this frequency of, like
purpose,
who we are.
Direction.
And this is a boundary in the sense that it defines, who we are, and it also defines who we are not.
Exactly, right? Because if you are the boy who runs with the wolves, then you're not the boy who flies with the eagles. And so if you're the boy who runs with the wolves, well, you're probably going to be in the forest more. If you're the boy who flies with the eagles, maybe you're going to be up higher. And so then there's even this sort of, it's like an identification, a labeling, and it comes with a certain flavor. Absolutely. And so that's what I find really interesting about names. Like, do we, like, the story you shared with your son, incredible, by the way. And that's what I find really interesting. Like, who decides the name, really? And so then if name is imprinting the direction, if our name holds the map, if our name to some extent holds that original codex which you speak of, then this is really interesting. Like, the boundaries were somehow set in place before. It's like this, what we spoke of, how, from source, that impulse to emanate from source, to become separate, quote unquote, beings, for the universe to experience itself, for us to bring something to serve evolution. And so within names, like, yeah, well, then the name could potentially hold, that certain function, and that function is different to another function within the interconnected web of all that is. And so then in order for that function to be fulfilled, perhaps boundaries is where that comes into place. Like if there were no boundaries, then how would that certain function be fulfilled? Otherwise it would be all merging into this one soup, and we are all in a soup. That's not a very nice way to say it, but do you see where I'm sort of going with here? Like I'm sort of connecting how the boundaries in some sense allow for the function of you, of me, of whoever else to be fulfilled, because there's that process of individuation that's necessary in order for that function to manifest, to actualize. And the name therefore can be that map. So what does your name mean? What's your map?
So, but that's, for example, the thing about names here. So in a native tribe, let's say indigenous, the name would usually relate either to the function, or it will relate to an ancestor, because, as well. And it usually would relate, or sometimes it would be names related to nature, because a native mindset perceives everyone as being part of a natural ecosystem. Now, after, let's say, they came with the concept of Christ and, Christianity angel, most of the people in the Western world were named after saints. They would choose a name in the calendar. The same in the Muslim culture, where people would have the names of, the prophets or the people from the scriptures. Or in India, they would also have names that are part of the mythology and the whole, lore inherited from the ancestor. So then these names, they carry more like values and virtues. It's more like stuff from the upper world. And this is what came, for example, with Christianity or with, religion compared to the native tribe. Yeah, so when somebody is called Gabriel, for example, which is like also a name of the archangel, which comes from Hebrew, means God is strong. And so then they hope to bring this quality in their child, right? They hope that by naming, but it's a hope, because the child is not strong yet, but they hope that they will invite this virtue into their field by resonance, which is not a function to be strong. It's a quality. It's a moral quality, let's say. It's a virtue. When in the native tribe, because it was more about, how can you fit in and how your code can support the thriving of our community. It was probably more based on function or on nature, because they didn't have this kind of upper world, definition of, or they would not put as much importance on the philosophy or the moral. It was more like, survival. Hey, what do you do? Who are you? What are you good at? And what do you enjoy to do? So, I think for this, it's different. Like, but where, for example, so the word Demian is actually one of the saints, and that is connected with another one that his name was Com or Como in Latin. And so one was the saint for the doctors, and the other one for the apothecaries. So like the pharmacist. And so Demian is actually the pharmacist. So it's like the one who was preparing medicine. Cool. And I discovered this really late, but the truth is that when I lived in India, I studied many years with an alchemist to prepare Ayurvedic remedies.
Yeah.
And that for years after, I had my own brand of, herbalism remedies or other kind of natural remedies. And that for me, it's something that was always really resonant.
Yeah.
And it took me a long time to understand that actually my name that my parents chose, even if they were not aware of this connection, it did connect me to a morphogenetic field that
Yes.
invited, you know, to explore this aspect of creation. So in this sense, I believe, that, our names, they define boundaries, but they're as well a map. And the map has boundaries. Yeah. That's why today, when you look at a map, if you would not have the borders, yeah, between different zones, even if it's not, political borders, but, to orientate and navigate a territory, boundaries help to, to be more clear. Hey, we want to
Yes.
go there. Well, if we don't have clear boundaries, there can mean anywhere.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. That's what I was speaking to about. I mean, I hear you with the name holding virtue as well, but speaking to how the name holds this sort of, and maybe less function, but more, this border. And so in order to navigate the map, the map being life, the map being evolution, the map being, it can be a mini map if we're speaking about the microcosm of a day even, and then fractalizing that to an entire lifetime. And so then if the name holds a virtue, it's sort of this unfoldment of, because a virtue, it's not necessarily something from my awareness to attain. It's like it's a direction. It's sort of like where the map could be leading to in some sense. And that function is how to actualize or to move forward towards the virtue. And that's really fascinating to hear how you naturally, through the morphogenic resonance of your name or the name, but it's chicken or the egg, right? Like, is it because of the name that you ended this way? Or is it the name found you because of the resonance that you incarnated with that somehow led you on this path? It's so, well, time's not linear, no space, no time, Carla, like maybe.
And we don't know. And it's probably
mystery.
both,
Yeah.
It's just, but like, you're right. It's, we don't know. Maybe I attracted the name because I already carried the code of, let's say the alchemist that wanted to do that. And
Sure.
And when my parents chose these names, it just came naturally because it carried this
Who chose
frequency.
it? Right.
And we don't know, and they probably don't know either.
Yeah.
And it's okay, It's, I think it's, because to come back to you probably have other question about boundaries, just because I see the time is passing.
As usual, time does that. Yeah, totally. Well, yeah, sure, absolutely. We can move on to a question actually that I have, which is sort of weaving into what we've spoken about, the name holding a particular border, which is a particular boundary, so that, there's a function to actualize, a virtue to walk towards, a sort of essence that's different to another essence or expresses differently, which serves the collective evolution purpose. So I know that you said that you've studied or you received teachings of Advaita, like Advaita Vedanta, right? The non-dualism. And so I find this really interesting connected to boundaries, because it seems somehow boundary-less in some sense. And so I'm interested to know what your experience has been maintaining this sense of sovereignty or individuation within the context of non-dualism. And furthering from that, if you've experienced or you have observed atrocities around you from that non-dual perspective, how do you hold even potentially emotional boundaries so that you know, so that you're not taking on so much, while still also holding in your awareness that in some degree connected to some fractal, this is you also.
That's a really good question. And I mean, you know, you have many levels of embodiment of Advaita or non-duality, and it's all about like shedding away the identifications. Yeah. So the practice of Advaita is whatever you put after I am, yeah, whatever comes after I am a man, I am Demian, I am, you know, born there, I'm living there, I am this, that. This is like an identification. So it's like our, let's say, core energy moving from our center and moving somewhere. Yeah. So it moves, let's say, the center of a wheel, and you have a wheel around you like a circle. So it moves to the edge of the circle. And this is like, it anchors itself. And this is what we're identified with. So the whole Advaita is to bring back these anchoring identifications that are not in the center, to bring them back in the center. So to say, I am not that, I am not that, I am not that, I am not that. I am that I am. You know, that's how it's translated in English. Which means literally that, you know, I am the center and I am everything at the same time and nothing at the same time.
The drop within the ocean within the drop.
Kind of.
Like this,
it's more subtle than this, but yeah,
okay.
It's like this idea of the drop, the ocean, it's definitely related. Yeah. Because in the world of Advaita, there are no cause and no effect. They are only they are happenings.
Wait, so is this outside of karma? How does that link in?
Yeah, I mean, you know, if you're not the doer of any action, and if you are nobody, then you cannot create karma. Yeah. And therefore you're not responsible because you don't have to respond because there's no you. So in theory, it's a really, you know, easy teaching that can sometimes be extremely bypassing.
I was gonna say
a lot of traps, you know, like plenty of traps there. So, but then in the practical things, for the people who go into Advaita, and so you know, you shed layers by layers some identification.
Yeah.
But obviously you still, you know, you still keep some, you know, until you would really kind of, you know, become a master or dissolve any sense of identification. So maybe with some, you know, plant medicine or psychedelic, you can reach some glimpse, or meditation, you can reach a glimpse where you truly, you know, dissolve into, let's say, all oneness, and you don't identify with anything, you know, more than other. So you're kind of becoming everything. But otherwise, as a human, you know, you're still holding, and you kind of need to hold a minimum of boundaries. What matters is that when it's about acting, you know, so doing something, that you can find this frequency where you can somehow allow a higher expression of life to do it. So it's like grace,
right.
So it's like the difference between dancing with your mind and controlling your movement, and surrendering and suddenly being gracious in your, let's say, movement expression because you stepped away. You as, you know, let's say an ego being. So you let the space for grace, the divine feminine, to express itself through you as an instrument. So that's the idea. So in this sense, you know, you still trust that the boundaries, because of grace, will be either respected or that, you know, that it won't hurt. Kind of.
Yeah, that's really
you know.
interesting, actually, because that links actually to one of the questions that I had, which was about very similar to what you just spoke of as being an instrument for the divine, a channel for the divine. And what's really, I guess, something connecting to boundaries here is within the process, like to bring it back to more, I guess, day-to-day happenings. Say you're birthing something, you're creating something. And so, part of the greater whole, at what point do you want to be just completely open source? And at what point do you want to contain what you're trying to create without it being quote unquote hacked, let's say? Or for you personally, Demian, like what's your awareness on that? Like, are you happy to just, no, it's free for all, like I'm a channel for the divine. If it comes through me, if it comes through them, great. Or it's like, no, I need to birth this. It needs to come through my channel.
I think everybody have to answer this for themselves. Personally, I have this, since I'm a child, I have this ability to, or I would even call it a fascination for what I call corruption, which is, which is entropy, or which is the desacralization. So I can observe, how everything that at some point is pure. So let's say it's sacred, it's with integrity. It remains pure and in integrity as long as it remains in a closed environment, not too many people, with maybe correct education, initiation.
Yeah, sure.
And as soon as it goes, too open and too wide, so it's shared without, let's say, the
same standards,
the control, of the quality control.
Yeah.
Then it gets kind of, corrupted.
Like
let's just take the example of
yeah,
so it can be from tobacco, which is a sacred plant in native, tribes, that got taken by Philip Morris and became, a weapon. It can be like cacao, that's where I live. From Paul is one of the ancient sacred beverage, but that became Van Houten, that became with sugar and stuff, addictive. And it became like, also a weapon, or at least, a destruction tool. You can see Reiki that, for example, Usui, when he found it, it was probably already pure.
Yeah.
And today, in one weekend, you can become, a master teacher.
Exactly.
So that's, it's up to us, if what is our need, that whatever we receive or whatever is birthed through us, how much we want it to remain pure.
Yeah.
So if we want it to remain pure, then we need to create our own domain,
containment, our own boundaries. Yeah.
Which means a lot of boundaries. It means initiation. It means, authority. It means kind of the pyramid, like an authority that says, hey, that's appropriate, it's not appropriate, you cannot do that, you can do that. It means as well secrecy, or confidentiality. So like all the secret societies, you would go through an initiation and you would have to kind of not speak about it. Like, I don't know, the Freemasons or any kind of secret society. And this was meant not to, it is a form of elitism, obviously, but it was meant to keep the purity or the integrity of the teaching.
Yes.
Some societies, like in India, they found other ways. Yeah, they found that to keep the integrity of a teaching and still to open it. So they were able to write in Sanskrit the whole, let's say, transmission in verses, so like poetry, with specific, metric, so that, and it would be an oral transmission for, generations to generations. So anyone would try to twist the text because then the metric, the poetry would be would feel weird and not gracious anymore. Then they knew that it would kind of be, unhackable or unalterable. Nobody could change it because it would be super obvious because it's a really advanced, let's say, mechanic of poetry that you cannot really twist it too much. If you want to go open source, which can come from the desire to share, like a lot of compassion. I think it's from a really as well naive perspective that the entropic forces will not take it and just corrupt it, because that's what I observe. I observe that there's a natural force that I don't know how natural it is actually, but it is present everywhere in every human that has this tendency to corrupt the original intention, let's say. And it doesn't mean it's always bad, because sometimes it can actualize, it can, make it evolve, it can create something new. So it's not necessarily bad. It's just that when your ego identify with your creation, it's like to be possessive, and it's I don't want to say it's human because but it's like the difference, like our children, they are my children, and you go to some African tribes and the children belong to kind of everyone. So it depends of our conditioning, right? Like how much we are possessive with our creation.
I hear you there. Yeah, exactly. And I guess that's also then speaking to, at what point do we surrender to serving that higher function and surrendering our ego self to allow that, I've used the word creative impulse, but that impulse to flow through, and how to say, it's like somehow the word emergent, like the emergent phenomenon, something wants to birth through the emergent phenomenon, and then our boundaries therefore required, like you said, sort of, I'm seeing it like a hermetic seal in order to actually birth it without it being somehow the fledgling coming through and then sort of being distorted somehow. So see that it's sort of like a dance between the two, of that hermetic seal, that containment, that certain degree of boundaries necessarily to actually birth something, instead of it just sort of dissolving and getting confused with the other threads and the other interrelated, like how it interrelates in a network, and sort of diluting, maybe, corrupting as well, another way to put it, perhaps. Cool. I'm aware also of time. How are you for time, Demian? Just to pop it in there.
I still have some time.
Okay.
If you have more questions, maybe one more
question. All right, let's see my whole big list of questions. Well, I'm really interested in your story, so I'll ask a question about you. I'm so interested in your story, Demian. There's so much to learn about you. But essentially, my question for you is, what are boundaries that you personally, on whatever level, physical, mental, emotional, spiritual, what boundaries have you struggled with the most to uphold? On the flip side, you could say, what has been the most easeful boundaries to uphold? Like, yeah, no problem. But I'm curious what your relationship personally to boundaries has been like.
What people would say, the people who let's say, who dare to share with me, is that when you, if you would meet me first, yeah, you would meet me. I've never met me before. You would go somewhere and you would, come next to me. Actually, people say that I have a really strong boundary, that I feel, it feels intimidating to people. It can feel cold, as not welcoming, and already grounded, like a kind of pillar.
Yes.
So that's what people say. So it means that, really early, probably in my childhood, I developed this strategy, not to feel safe, and also as a kind of a filter that people have to knock at the door and they have to check if I'm available, if I'm in the right space. So this is something that for me, sometimes I can struggle with, because I'm not necessarily fully aware of this kind of by default setting, and sometimes I would like to be more to let's say, to seem more friendly or more welcoming. And if I don't do a conscious effort about it,
yeah,
to then then it's perceived more as intimidating, which probably comes, from, whatever young childhood traumas where I put this so that people would not mess up with me.
yes.
So I'm aware that I have this, and it's definitely, something in my field that is like a repellent, a repellent for, and I would say it's probably a repellent for everything that doesn't want to be deep. For example, I don't really appreciate chit chatting or superficial talk.
Sure.
I'd rather, read a book or be alone with myself or garden than to chit chat with people.
Oh, the weather.
But
so wonderful, the weather.
So then, exactly. But this is, this is just my preferences. I can do it, and but so sometimes I also see that our boundaries, they act as a filter.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because there is this idea that the people who dare to still go through it, through the right protocol or in a really polite and respectful way, then that these people have a genuine interest to know, to share, to listen, to interact. Yes. So I would say that this is something I'm aware of, and that sometimes it's like a veil that hides probably, let's say, some qualities like kindness, compassion, caring, that become not obvious at all because they are hidden by this veil of intimidation.
Yeah, but reserved for those who've somehow, quote unquote, earned it, right? They've gone through the filters so that you feel safe enough to open the flower that is you and share this essence that you don't want to just waste on, if I can use that word, feels somehow cold.
Yeah, I mean, after it doesn't mean it doesn't mean it's actualized, so it's a strategy that worked really well, and that it's from a really long time present. I'm not sure that today it's as appropriate as it was, and it probably could be actualized in a more, smooth way. But it's so deeply rooted that if I don't consciously choose to adopt another strategy, then it goes back as a by default setting. So that's, for example, one of the boundaries. The other boundary I've seen that I struggle with, for example, in my work, is so you have the boundary of time, like exactly like now.
Yes.
So like to go beyond time. So it's something that for me it's difficult to contain myself in time.
I feel you with this one.
And sometimes you have the boundary as well of worth, or let's say value, which sometimes can be related to money.
Yes.
And so it's better, but for a long time in my life I struggled with that one. And as well with as how, let's say, how much available I am. Yeah. So sometimes I see that I don't, like an office that would have opening hours and closing hours. I do it clearly, So it's this, this desire to be nice and kind of always available. And in some moment of my life, I have a lot of, let's say, students, clients, so I can receive a lot of sometimes say, hey, but it's too much, or I'm not available now. And so if I would be more clear, I would not have to deal with, having to choose to reply or not reply, or feeling that sometimes I'm rude because I became like monosyllabic, and yes, no, and I don't take the time to write properly. But if I had actually, for example, clear timings, that would be clear for everyone. But first for myself, I would say, hey, during these hours, I really take the time, and I'm more fully available, and I'm trying my best not to be rude. And when it's closed, then there's nothing. I'm not available. So for example, for me, this is hard, and I know, that it would be for my benefit. I still don't do it. Because
Classic
this new
human.
technology, it's like if your office is always available.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. The boundaries between work and home, even dissolving, blurring in this modern time.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that would be, and it's for me, that would be more the boundary between giving and receiving, between the kind of the left and the right. It's, so for example, it's this thing that, to feel to give more, that to give more is better, when actually I realized that to give more is not better.
Yeah. Yeah.
Not at all.
This sort of negative, even.
Because it means people have to receive more. And to receive more, it means that you need more time. You need to dedicate more time. You need to make yourself available. And actually, sometimes people, they don't have time. So you think that it's nice because you give more, but actually you kind of overwhelm the receptor on the other side. So I see also there that my boundaries they can always be refined, and it's about having clear agreement with ourselves about our needs. And it's also about, having a clear definition of what is decent, what is polite, and what is not, or let's say respectful, and we all have a different conditioning about that, right? Like
yes, absolutely. For one person, what is respectful is different. For what is another, what is even giving to one person is maybe not what someone else perceives as giving. And so, yeah, I really hear you there. Even the perception of what is a nice thing to do or what is not a nice thing to do. But yeah, thank you for sharing about that and for sharing more about you. I really do appreciate that. I feel there's so much to Demian. Hey, even this boundary of the outside projection of how we perceive you. You're this incredible teacher, a healer, but then even behind those boundaries, strip back the onion layers, like the essence of Demian. I find that's really beautiful to start to unpack. But thank you so much. Thank you so much for sharing, for being here.
Thank you,
I
Sophie.
really am enjoying these conversations that are unfolding so far. Like before, you can find Demian's work through his website, which I will link all the stuff below, like I did last time. Magic Vibrations Healing on YouTube, on Udemy, super easy to find as well. Is there anything else that you'd like to share? There's something coming up that you'd like people to know about, Demian?
Thank you, Sophie.
Cool. Did I did I pause just before?
Yeah, I mean, for me, the last you froze for a few seconds. That's
Okay.
just at the end.
Okay.
But your recording will be good.
Okay, cool. Awesome. The final thing that I asked was if you have, do you have anything coming up that you would like to share for people to know about, maybe get involved?
I mean, I have a kind of new big project offering that is getting birthed, and it will take a while. And so it's something that it's called the Grid Masters, and it's a kind of a long-term program, let's say, which I will probably speak more other day about it. But yeah, there is something I would say like a kind of masterpiece that is being channeled and birthed, and that started a while ago. And I see that this will be one of the it will be a kind of what I will call a masterpiece, as the depth and the richness and the extent of this offering. And so yeah, it brings a lot of excitement.
Oh, I froze again. Oh, the internet. It's raining here, so it's probably also spirit being like, all right, come on guys, wrap it up.
Okay, good.
But yeah, cool. There's enough that I got in there, so I can edit all this stuff out, which is totally fine. But cool. Thank you, Demian. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you, Sophie.
Is there anything else to wrap up? I think that's it. Yeah. Well, honestly, until next time, when a new topic unfolds for the people to enjoy and witness and learn from. So have a beautiful rest of your day. Thank you everybody for watching. All the information's below. You can find Demian's work, you can find my work, and somehow they're fusing together, which is this magical, beautiful synthesis. So thank you for being here. Demian, thank you for being here. And until next time.
Until next time. Thank you, Sophie.